Good morning again, everyone. At this time, we will call to order. Good morning, Madam Abdul Salam.
Good morning.
At this time, we will call to order the October 27th GM/CEO Search Committee meeting. First, may I have a motion for approval of the March 28th, April 14th, July 14th, September 8th, and October 3rd GM CEO Search Committee meetings? May I have a motion?
Do we do this on electronic?
I move approval. I move approval of the minutes.
Thank you. Second. Thank you. Let us vote.
A vote.
Members of the committee are voting.
Oh, never mind. Okay, never mind. Let's
Can
go.
someone else second it since she's
I
not?
seconded, and I'm not on the committee, so you might want to get
I
a
second.
sorry.
Mr. Snyder, second as well. So,
Shall we vote again?
Thank you.
Just to make
Let
sure
us
it's
vote. Let
good?
us vote now for correction.
Down.
Thank you. The members of the committee have voted. At this time, may I have a motion to go into executive session for personnel matters? Oh, well, I need to call the special call meeting to order. I thought I did that at the beginning. But at this time, we will call to order the special call meeting of the search committee
Madam Chair, I think we have to adjourn the special.
of the board of directors.
Madam Chair, I think we need to adjourn the GM CEO search committee first.
It only took me an hour and a half to get here, Mr. Andrews, an hour and a half.
And you're doing fantastic.
Well, thank you. An hour and a half. Every school board, every school bus in the counties I passed, but I was very, right. No, yes, I waited and I took my turn. So at this time, we will call to order.
We will adjourn.
We will adjourn the search committee. May I have a motion?
I move that we adjourn.
Since you were an advisor, I think that's okay. Let us vote.
I think
The
that's
search
okay.
committee has adjourned. At this time, we will call to order the special call meeting of the MARTA Board of Directors for today, October 27th. And may I have a motion to
I'll move
go
we-
into executive session for a personnel matter?
I will make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Okay.
Let us vote. At this time, we will go into executive session.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Agenda that's up there is slightly different than everybody has in front of them, and we're getting that corrected right now. So when we come out of executive session, it will
order the special called meeting of the MARTA Board of Directors. At this time, the GM CEO Search Committee will give their report. The GM CEO Search Committee has recommended Mr. Collie Greenwood as the next GM CEO of MARTA. You may take a bow. Oh, he wants us to vote first? Okay, well, you know, after all of that traffic this morning, I don't know where we are. So, Mr. Andrews, will you please read the resolution?
Yes, ma'am. Resolution authorizing the chair of the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority Board of Directors to execute a general manager CEO employment agreement with Collie Greenwood. Whereas the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority appointed Collie Greenwood as interim CEO GM on January 15th at an emergency meeting of the Board of Directors. And whereas at a subsequent meeting, the Board of Directors also authorized the chair of the board to create a GM CEO search committee with the intent to perform a nationwide search for a permanent GM CEO. And whereas MARTA engaged the services of Kraftmeyer and Associates to perform the search for a new GM CEO, and whereas 11 candidates were identified with varying backgrounds in transportation and other business sectors, and following the interview process, the GM CEO search committee named Mr. Greenwood as a sole finalist. And whereas the GM CEO search committee found that Mr. Greenwood demonstrated that he is the best person to lead MARTA into the future, and whereas the MARTA Board of Directors agrees with the recommendation of the GM CEO Search Committee and names Mr. Collie Greenwood the GM CEO of MARTA, Therefore, be it resolved, the Board of Directors of the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority, that Mr. Collie Greenwood is hereby named GM CEO of MARTA, and therefore be it further resolved, the Chair of the Board of Directors is hereby authorized to negotiate an employment agreement for Mr. Collie Greenwood to serve as MARTA's CEO, GM, with the final terms to be approved by the Board of Directors.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews.
I move to approve the resolution.
I'll second that motion.
The motion has been made and has been properly second. Do we have the ability to vote on this? We're having a few technical updates. Okay. Let us vote. The resolution has passed. Mr. Greenwood is now recommended and supported as the next GM CEO. You may now take a bow. Did we get the vote for Ms.? Yes, her vote is here. Okay. Yes, great. Thank you. Are there any other matters that come before the board at this time?
Chair, if I may make a brief comment?
Very brief.
Very brief. That would be uncharacteristic, but I'll try. Colleague, congratulations. I was not a voting member of the search committee, but I was an enthusiastic advisor, and it is, I think, roundly a unanimous recommendation that I'm glad to see the board act on today. I will just say, and we had this conversation before, heavy is the head that wears the crown. Back in 2016, the voters of the city of Atlanta approved a half-cent sales tax, and we need to make more progress on more MARTA than we have in the prior 6 years, and we need to do that soon. But given my belief that you are the person to help lead us to do that, congratulations and welcome.
And
To
also,
no longer having the interim word in your job title.
Thank you, Mr. May I speak, Madam Chair?
and to, yes,
Yeah.
and to echo those, let us make sure that we deliver on the promises to all of our jurisdictions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ash. Thank you, everyone, all Board of Directors, for your support. I am truly humbled by this and grateful for this. And, you know, as I sit here and, you know, look at the faces in the room, including our executive members, and there's just such a vast level of support for what we need to do here at MARTA, and I feel very, very encouraged to get this done. I'm committed to this, and when I say let's boldly go, that is exactly what we're going to do. We have some key priorities that are top of mind, and especially now with this question removed from my mind, we are all in. So thank you so much, and you will not be disappointed.
Is there anyone else? Mr. Mullis? Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
Madam
I have
Chair, I would
difficulty
also
seeing your-
echo Mr. Ash's comments. There is the voters of Clayton County and the city of Atlanta who are dependent on the success of Mr. Greenwood and MARTA for their livelihoods, and we would encourage Mr. Greenwood to put forth the team and the resources to make their lives better every day. And the folks in the city of Atlanta, where I represent, I'm sure the folks in Clayton County will provide you every effort and resources we can to make you successful.
Any other comments from the board? Hearing none, this meeting is now adjourned.
Planning and Capital Programs Committee meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the September 29th, 2022 minutes. Could I have a motion and a second, please? Okay. We have a motion by Durrett, second by Hartage. Can we vote? Motion's approved. The next item on the agenda is a briefing for the South Fulton County Capital Programs or Projects Update by Josh Rowan, Deputy General Manager of Capital Programs and Expansion. Josh?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Pond. I'd like to.
Hey, Josh,
Yes.
before you bend, could you bend over a little bit so we could see you?
Got me to sit in a chair. Yeah. I did a dry run yesterday and remembered how the screen blocks the left side. So, but thank you, Committee Chair Pond. Let me be the first to thank General Manager, CEO, Mr. Collie Greenwood. Appreciate serving as your deputy. To the committee and to the fabulous team that backs me. We've prepared a briefing regarding South Fulton County projects. It's very similar to the other jurisdictional briefings that we do. Hitting really the high points, and so it hopefully will set up conversations later on. So let's move to the next slide where we cover the agenda. Just there's three main topic areas: the current stops and services, bus network redesign. We're not going to spend a lot of time on the redesign, but then item 3 on the expansion program. So next slide, talking about current stops and services. We can move to the next slide. A lot of good things happening. You see changes even in September of 2022, and I would draw your attention to the last 3 bullets that we've added back service to 9 routes, 7 additional routes have had schedules revised, and that we're restoring service on Route 71. And so these things continue to be in flux, but as you see, as we come out of the pandemic and as the service starts to enhance, that positive change is being made. So next slide. One thing that's important really throughout the footprint of the authority becomes the bus stops and the amenities. And you can see, what you'll see is actually the last point on this slide is what's critical, that 71% of our boardings take place at stops with amenities. And that makes sense. And in the past, I've talked about my mother riding transit, that she would always say she's happy to wait for the bus, but she just doesn't want to get rained on. And I think a lot of people share that feeling. And so let's go to the next slide, and we can give some specifics with where we are on the 1,000 amenities program. And so you can see it's a 5-year program, 50 per year in Fulton County. I like the map on the right because it actually aligns very well with the previous chart, which shows where the boardings are taking place. And so we've installed 69, 13 sites are in permitting, 17 are in design, and that's about $1.5 million investment in the not program. Next slide just shows a picture of before and after, and I think it's pretty clear that on the left, not quite as nice as what's on the right, and that's what we strive to deliver as the enhanced experience for the rider and for the customer. Jumping ahead into bus network redesign. Next slide, please. In fact, you can jump one more. Really more of a conceptual slide. One of the challenges when we talk about the network redesign are the concepts of ridership and coverage. So one philosophy says you go where the riders are. The other says you make it available geographically. You end up with a hybrid. The most important point of the bus network redesign is we've actually held open the community survey, and so we would encourage everybody to provide feedback. That's vitally important, because quite often it's some of the voices that are most dependent upon the service that aren't the loudest. And so we want to hear from the community and take that feedback into account as we redesign the network. So next slide, we're going to get into the expansion side of the program, which is really quite exciting. Two main corridors emerge. My understanding was this was actually initially seen as one project. It's been unhinged, so now we're looking at South Fulton Parkway and Roosevelt Highway as separate corridor planning efforts. Both important to this part of the footprint for MARTA. As you can see, really in that northeast quadrant of the slide, that connection into heavy rail becomes vitally important. And so a lot of activity around the College Park station. Keep this picture in your mind, because we're going to show some land use photos. We're also going to show some employment, and you're going to see how how actually Roosevelt Highway starts to emerge as the one that's maybe out front a little bit in the process. So let's go to the next slide. This is just simply a breakdown of the different modes: local bus, ART, and BRT. It's there for educational purposes and to refer back to. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time talking about these, but just know that those are the discussions being had, which is the best service for these corridors. So next slide. One thing that's good is that we've actually been able to look at previous planning efforts and start pulling those into what our team is working on. So we're really taking into account past efforts that have gone into this area. Next slide is a schedule slide. And I think this is an important one. As you can see on both of them, we're in the assessment phase. On Roosevelt Highway, you can see that we're gonna start to move a little more quickly, because it's trending towards a enhanced bus service. But we want to again unhinge those, because I don't think they're going to move on the same schedule. But you can see again, this is where we are, both of them in the assessment phase. So concepts coming in 23. Next slide, please. Lot of maps we're going to show. The key takeaway here is really when you start looking at the potential. There is potential for increased development, increased service, and it's, as I look at these slides, I think of other corridors like a Moreland Avenue or a Donnelly Hollowell, that this is the opportunity to get things right for transit in these corridors as the growth comes to the Atlanta region. And so that's what's exciting about these projects. So we have to talk about land use in that discussion. The next slide just covers the existing service, the Route 82. You see we have about 2,500 trips. The heat map aligns pretty closely with the ridership map that we had on the amenities, and you can see it. There's a lot of activity as you get into that College Park heavy rail area of this. So connections become very important, really, for everyone in the region. Next slide, please. We'll jump ahead a little bit to. This is actually a slide I was pleasantly surprised by. The green dots and the blue and the purple show employment activity down here. So this is a growing area. This is an area seeing economic activity, and so those connections become important both for the people who live in these areas as well as the people who may be commuting into them. And so that was just again, it's a lot of activity going on the employment side that we need to be accounting for as we do these studies. The next slide on Roosevelt Highway, it's a very similar thing. You see. Today there's not significant density, but we have to start looking at the land use as well as the employment density, knowing that the growth is coming, and so that will factor the decisions we make. On the next slide, it just highlights the current service, the Route 180, similar, about 2,100 daily riders, and that's a 2019 number. And so, but you can see even at the end points, a lot of activity. That's where we see the highest ridership. So one of the things we look at, and that we're looking at if we go to the next slide, is just the evaluation of the stops. And earlier we showed before and after pictures, and these are the things we take into account as really how do we best serve the passengers through the infrastructure, utilities, and you can see everything else on the list, but I really like the next slide, which starts to show what the stops could look like. And we have two that we're really looking at and how we factor those in. And it's the improved stop and the super stop, all for the purpose of better passenger experience when you're not actually on the bus. And so this is another one that a lot of information on this slide, but we put this one forward again as another informational slide to share. Moving on to the next, this is you can call it, this is our action items list. You can see we've had numerous meetings through the spring and summer. In fact, I was challenging myself. I'm giving a similar presentation tonight to the South Fulton Municipal Association. So I don't want this to be my best performance today, but this one still has to be pretty good for you all. And so we're staying engaged, and you can see there's some changes and some requests that have been made in the 3 bullet points that we have to reassess the purpose and need. That's a common thing that we do. And then we've been asked to consider actually extending the study area, 2 miles to East Point and 10 miles down to Chattahoochee Hills. The other item is continued coordination with GDOT. These corridors tend to start serving as cut-throughs for commuters, which makes it a challenge for us and makes it a challenge for everyone. So the placement becomes very important for the safety of our transit rider. And so on to the next slide. This is where we're really probably about a year away from having strategy discussions for where does the money come from to deliver such a project. And that becomes vitally important. So the engagement with the community, the engagement with the elected officials, much more to come over the next year as we get through concept into design and have to start making the strategic decisions for which projects we think compete. And that's where we think the Roosevelt Highway, being apart from South Fulton, actually could make it more competitive. And then the last slide is just a visual of next steps. And you can see we're continuing the evaluation, but by early mid-23, we will be having those financial discussions, which do become strategic discussions because we have to put sort of play the game with funding opportunities to put our best foot forward. And so there's quite a bit going on, both from an economic development perspective, a growth perspective, and a MARTA perspective in South Fulton. And so this wraps up the high-level preview that I have today for South Fulton, and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Josh. Good presentation. Are there any questions for Mr. Rowan? Yeah, Bill.
Well, I think looking at this map, Josh, gives me this is a typical example of a great idea with no funding. And how is it going to get built? I mean, it's a great process. It looks incredible, but there's nobody to do the funding for this thing. And there's several of these places going on around the region now. But there's got to be somebody at MARTA or somebody somewhere has got to start to figure out how we're going to build this stuff without money. Because even when you get this design done and you go to the federal government and ask for $400 million, somebody's got to come up with the match. And we don't have a way to do that right now. And unless there's several issues, special service tax districts, public-private partnerships, all those kind of things that value added, that might add a way to do this kind of stuff, but where's the emphasis, where's the people that are going to champion that effort to make sure that gets done? Because I don't see anybody doing a sales tax anytime soon for more transit funds. I just don't see the possibility of that happening. I think we've about run the extent of the sales tax out in this region. We've got to figure out another way to do it. And I think maybe it's MARTA's job to begin to figure out how to do that. But I don't know of anybody here that's been hired to do that. So anyway, that's just my philosophy, that I think MARTA's years behind in trying to figure out where the money's going to come from. And if there are other people around the country that are doing this and have figured this out, then we need to know about that too, how they're doing it, where their money's coming from. Is it all coming from the state? Is it all coming federal government, where do we get the money to do this kind of stuff with? Because you're gonna finish this study and this planning, and we're gonna be sitting here, it's gonna be rolled up and put on the shelf.
Yes, sir, and forgive me, I feel weird responding to you and seeing the middle portion of your body there. And I think that is the crux of the conversation. I would share some strategy, though, that the state has used historically to our advantage on the transportation side, which is to advance projects through design, because you just never know what's going to happen from the funding side. So the more projects we have ready to go, we've heard a lot really in the last decade about shovel-ready. Shovel-ready is a little bit of a misnomer. It's really designed and ready to go. And so we know the need is going to be there. We know the demand is there. It's a low-risk investment to take this through design. And then as we advance design, start talking about what are those financing strategies. And you're exactly right, sir. I agree with you that those are going to be some very, very challenging conversations that we have here at MARTA, is how do we advance these in new ways that we haven't considered before.
Any other questions for Josh?
Chair Pond, I have a question.
Sure. Stacy.
Great presentation, thank you. And to piggyback on Mayor Floyd's comment in regards to funding. So one thing that I didn't notice on the funding slide was the Safe Routes for All grant that we just, well, you weren't here, so I'm not sure if you're privy to those discussions. But I wanted to see, did we get everything submitted for that one?
We do reference one of the state grants or the federal grants we received. I breezed right past it.
Okay.
We can give you the details on that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Sure.
Yes, sir. Mr. Roy, looking at the map is very difficult to see the detail, but there are at least, I think, 3 major corridors that feed into Roosevelt Highway. You've got Buffington Road that has a large number of new subdivisions and development and businesses. And then you've got Washington Road, and you've also got Welcome All, which is mostly residential, but a lot of people are taking the buses and feeding into Roosevelt Highway. So will there be any consideration for improvements on those corridors?
So I'm sorry, excuse me. We would certainly be looking at how connections are made with existing service. That if you think about not only improved service but improved connectivity, that would then be how does existing service tie to whatever the future mode ends up looking like. And so yes, we would look at the areas that are tying into these 2 corridors.
Thank you.
Okay. Jim.
Josh, even though I'm appointed by DeKalb County, I have a lot of relationships in Chattahoochee Hills. So I would offer to you, if you think it would be helpful for me to participate in any of these, I'm happy to do so if I'm available. But because it's not my jurisdictional appointment, you wouldn't think to talk with me about it, but.
Yes, sir, and thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Just one other comment, Bill, going back to the funding piece, I think each project or each major area could have its different strategy. And one of the things we have mentioned, and we advanced this last year, was talking about MARTA having some additional bonding capacity to match with other grants, such as Small Start grants. So I think your point's right on. We need to focus on these projects that need funding and figure out what is that strategy. And I think they're different for every location.
I couldn't agree with you more, Mr. Chairman, and Collie, I'm talking to you now, is that there are tools, we need every tool that we can have in the toolbox. And that involves a lot of things that MARTA is not capable of accessing right now. And somehow, and I suggest maybe some sort of conversation with the ATL board or the people that are running that, Heather not here, but is it some sort of concept about how people around the world or around the country are financing transit these days, and how we might begin to go to the legislature or to whoever it might be appropriate so that we, MARTA, as a transit agency, has access to every possible tool that there is available, because as the chairman has just said, everything's going to be a little different. Figuring out somehow you can do that would open up avenues like Douglas County or Rockdale County or portions of Gwinnett County or Cobb County without them having to vote on a 1-cent sales tax. So there are ways to approach this that I think it's MARTA's responsibility to start talking about this and figuring out how to do that. I think it's one of the things that we've got to begin to have the conversation around, or we're going to get left behind when we get these nice projects done, designed and planned, and then don't have any way to get them done.
Josh, I do have one other
Yes, sir.
question, not a question for you, but if you could just give us a quick snapshot on working with the program management team on putting together a reporting system that allows us to see where all of these projects that do have a dedicated funding source going forward, schedule and budget.
I'd be happy to. In fact, we have one tool that exists and one that's in development. Our team has put together what's called the Project Snapshot tool. I can't take any credit for it, but I'm probably one of the heaviest users of it, and it actually shows everything in the CPEI portfolio. And it's a lot of good information about what's in the program. Now it's fairly static because it's reporting by fiscal year. What we're working on presently are two dashboards, one for the expansion program and one for the state of good repair. And basically it's going to be showing you how we are performing against our plan. So a measurement of XPI, which is a combination of cost and schedule. It's going to be a one-pager that a 11 by 17 one-pager that you could drill down into if you wanted the granularity, but it'll provide the snapshots at the project level as well as at the programmatic level. And so it'll provide a really high degree of transparency and accountability for our team, because you're going to very quickly be able to tell with essentially one measurement, are we performing in accordance with our plan?
Thank you. And I think your target's the first of the year.
First of the year, yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Make that
yes.
alive. Great. Any other questions for Josh? Okay, we'll move to the next item, and it's a resolution authorizing the modification of the award of a contract for for structural inspection engineering services presented by Larry Prescott.
Thank you for that introduction, Mr. Chairman Pond. Good morning, GM Greenwood, Mayor Floyd, Chairman, committee members, and gallery. This is a resolution authorizing an award of contract for the procurement of structural inspection services, REIAE 50149. Next slide, please. So scope-wise, this is a program that's been ongoing for the past 10 years that we're re-upping for another 5. It's an inspection and engineering services for the structural system that we have out there. We have 144 structures within our system, 14 miles of aerial track, including 14 stations. We also have 9 miles of tunnel, including 7 stations. All those need to be inspected, and we also have to meet the federal requirements for the MBIS biannual bridge inspections on those as well. So this team provides that. A couple examples are the Peachtree Center Station, where we have the rock cavern down there with suspended ceilings. So the inspection of those attachments over time, we need to make sure nothing comes down on that. HE Homes, we have a double crossover that has cracking, possibly due to bridge vibration. So they're doing inspections for that as well. I've spent my time as a bridge troll, and I'm happy to have them doing the services for us. Next slide, please. All right, status-wise, came to this committee back in February to do the solicitation. In August, we received 3 qualified vendors, and the Source Evaluation Committee reviewed them and independently scored them. In September, we met again, and due to the ranking, the matrix that came out to that, it was decisive separation between the 3, and we recommended the award of a single proponent. Next slide, please. So the recommendation is the approval of a resolution authorizing the general manager, CEO, to enter into contract procurement design services for REI, AEI 50149 structural inspections with Volkert CERM. Volkert CERM is the joint venture team, where CERM is a DBE partner of that team. The subs, Schnabel, Innovative Management Services, and the Clayton Traffic Control is a new DBE added to the team, and the SEVA Corrosion Services is another DBE added to the team, so they can increase and maintain their DBE participation in this program. As I stated, we're going from a 10-year program to a 5-year with 3 base and 2 options. The estimated $600 per year over the 5 years for a $3 million overall program. The project inspections will be annually for the capital program supplied, the funding for that. And then the Office of Diversity and Inclusion has given us a 23% DBE participation this year, and the team has, of course, always dedicated a 23 or more for this program. Next slide. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, could I get a motion and a second for the resolution, please? Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Prescott? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question. Doing these inspections that are being done, I saw you said some of them being done by drones and throughout the, because I can understand that. So what happens when these inspections are done and they come back and there's a problem? Does this engineering, these engineers and companies, do they all come together and come up with best solutions, or they just say, hey, this is something we give the MARTA, you have to find a way to get it done?
They do the inspection, and they make recommendations for repair, and we collaborate on a repair program to fix it.
They do,
So
okay,
they,
thank
they
you.
are responsible for that the whole time.
They own it, all right.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Prescott? We have a motion by Dewart, a second by Snyder. Could we vote, please? The motion passes.
Thank you.
The next item is a resolution authorizing the disposal of non-exclusive permanent easements to the Atlanta Development Authority, doing business as Invest Atlanta, and through our special agent to the Atlanta Beltline. That'll be led by Robin Boyd. Robin?
Good morning, Chairman Pond, Mayor Floyd, GM Greenwood, and members of the committee. If you could go to the next slide, please. So the Beltline on their West Side Trail, their segment 4 of the West Side Trail, will run along MARTA's Proctor Creek line. And the Beltline has identified 9 parcels that they've named. They all fall within one MARTA disposal parcel, which is C5019A, and then it's tracks 1 through 9. And you can see at the top of this table the appraised values for each parcel. And these would be for non-exclusive easement agreements that would be permanent for $198,500. On the bottom of the table, it shows when each tract was acquired, and they all come under one FTA grant, and so we will get FTA approval prior to signing the agreement. And the next slide. So this is just an overall of, this is segment 4, so it starts at Washington Park and goes to just above Donald Lee Holloway. And then if you go to the next slide, 3 of the parcels are just near the Westmore Drive cul-de-sac. And the next slide, it just keeps moving north to the Ollie Circle cul-de-sac. And the next slide. And if you go to the next, then this one goes all the way to Joseph E. Boone. I'm sorry, so it was Joseph E. Boone, not Holloway. And then the next one is just north of Joseph E. Boone. So it's 9 of them. And the next slide. So we're requesting authorization to execute an easement agreement for non-exclusive permanent easements with, it will be through Invest Atlanta for the Atlanta Beltline. Are there any questions?
Could I get a motion and a second, please? Moved by Dewart, second by Hartage. Okay, any questions for Ms. Boyd? Yes, Mr. Dewart.
Robin, what exactly is a disposal parcel?
It's a number that we assign to a parcel that, for disposal purposes, in this case, not to sell. This is our right-of-way along our Proctor Creek line. But that's how we track all of our parcels. So when we acquire it, it'll be given a different number. It's not the same number. And when it can be disposed, it's a number we assign to it.
Okay, thank you.
Clarification, we're talking about easements here. We're not giving away any property.
Correct. We're not selling anything, and they're non-exclusive easement, so we can still do anything under, over. It's still our property.
Any other questions, Ms. Boyd? Yes, sir, Mr.
Mr.
President.
Chairman, just one quick question. The easement that we have here, is that a one-time payment of $198,500?
Correct.
Okay, so once that's paid, it'll be in perpetuity, just forever?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Durrett?
Robin, would the belt line be built on this, or is this to allow them to construct it during the construction process?
The belt line would be built along this. And as soon as it gets to that last slide, just north of Joseph E. Boone, all of the rest of the land is owned by the city. So the next segment, there shouldn't be anything from MARTA.
Anything else? Any other questions? If not, let's vote, please. The resolution passes. Are there any other matters to come before this committee? If not, the meeting's adjourned.
We taking a break? Tareen? Yeah. Ready for me to start? Let me know when. Okay. Tareen? Okay, just say on the mic when it's time for ops and safety, and I'm ready. Okay, thanks. Yes, ma'am. Okay, I'm ready. Good morning, everyone. This calls to order the meeting of the Operations and Safety Committee meeting. First item on the agenda is approval of the September 29th, 2022 Operations and Safety Committee meeting minutes. May I please have a motion and a second? Okay.
I put me as a yes somehow, but there we go.
It's been moved and second.
Okay, thank you. Put me as a yes as well. All those in favor, please vote. All opposed, same sign. Second item on the agenda this morning is a briefing on the CQ 400 project update. Connie Krisak, Senior Director, Rail Vehicle Procurement. Connie, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Good morning, Vice Chair Abdul Salam, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. Wright, and members of the Operation and Safety Committee. May I direct your attention to item number 2, and this is an overview of the CQ 400 train status. Next. So as we all know, the exciting thing about the train is that it's actually being made. As we know the design now, and as we've all seen the aesthetics of the inside and the outside of the train, it basically looks like this. Next. And as we all know, the public engagement process of having people and our patrons interact with the actual design of the vehicle has been immensely popular and successful for us. We have a train that is very oriented towards our patron needs, and it has very special functions and aesthetics, and allows for all riders to ride the system in a safe and comfortable mode. Next. In September, late September, a few of us represented MARTA were able to go to Szolnok, Hungary, in order to see the making of our train. In this picture, you see where all the material, which is all aluminum, is stored, and it's ready for that 1 week of process. So they store the material for 1 week, and they use the material, and then they get additional material. So it's a very defined process, but a very fast one. This facility is able to fabricate about 540 vehicle bodies a year. Next. What we did in this facility was to look at the welding process. The welding and the manufacturing process of the vehicle is very intense. And mostly it's automated. There are dozens of machines making the welds, the specialized welds, and very fast at what they do. There is a lot of manual welding in areas where it's hard to reach, and in order to make everything dimensionally right. Next. So our inspectors did the first article inspection of the first train. We looked at the welds, we looked at a lot of dimensional tolerances that were met, and we met with a lot of the Stadler people in the process and how things were documented and how things came out. I must say that the Stadler process is very tight with tolerances, and when I say tight, we're talking about 4 to 6 millimeters in a length of about 95 feet. So if you look at all these pieces being welded together and the end result is either precisely the right dimension or 4 millimeters off, it's quite amazing. Next. This is our train, and if you look at the bottom part, it is where the crash management system is designed, and this is particular to a Stadler train. The crash management design allows, in case of impact, for all of that load to be transferred to the bottom of the train, starting from the very front all the way to the back. This allows the cab area to be completely safe for the operator and as well for the patrons inside the their cab area. So all of the load is transferred to the bottom. The initial model that was run by Stadler shows that the train is completely safe in a 15-mile-per-hour hit, which is what the guidelines dictate. And there was no derailment of the vehicle, and everything remained pretty much intact. Next. As you can see, the scale of the vehicle is very large. None of our guys are small. They're tall, and you can see how small they look in the front of the train. I like this picture because it shows the real scale of the body of the train. Next. This is the inside of the train, quite expansive, showing the doors, the window openings, and the whole body of the train. At the very end, you can see where the next train would join in for the transition of being able to go from one end of the train to all the way to the other end of the train. Next. This is the outside, and you can see some of the pieces as they come together where the welds are. They've been narrowed down in order to take the paint that will be showing in the next couple of slides. Next. And here we have it. Our vehicle is primed and ready to deliver. This is the one that's coming. The priming goes on the outside of the train and on the floor. And what happens after this, once we get it to the States, to Salt Lake City, they will do the final coats of paint and they will do the full assembly of the car. All of the components will be fitted inside the train, all the windows, all the electronics, all the wiring, the furnishings, everything goes in at Salt Lake City. Next. So here we have it. This is our actual train in Germany, the port, and it's ready to be delivered. This one will be coming, for full disclosure, this one will be coming to the port of Galveston, and we have another one coming, and it's on its way also to the port of Brunswick. So the first car body in Atlanta will be in December of this year. The car body begins assembly next year, the whole year, in Salt Lake City. After it gets fully assembled, it goes to Atlanta in 2024, and that whole year you'll see the trains beginning to be tested along our system. And in 2025, the first train set will go into full revenue service. Thank you. At this time, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Connie. Are there any questions for Ms. Christine? I can't see your hands.
Yep, I have a question. Connie, car body in Atlanta before assembly in Salt Lake City?
Yes, we just wanted to make sure that people could actually physically see the car body. So we'll be able to see the scale and the trailer bringing it through, and then it'll continue to go to Salt Lake City.
All right, thank you.
So it's making a momentary stop here to commemorate the event.
Just to realize it's real.
It's real.
Okay.
Hi, this is Frida Hardage. Connie,
Ms. Hardage.
when we went to Utah and got to work with Stadler that day, and I know Rod Frierson was with me that day. I don't know if anybody else was or not, but that was an amazing experience to be able to for me to wear 3D glasses was an amazing experience. But it was really amazing to have input and to be able to see how the riders will enter and exit and all the features that those trains will have. So I know this is very exciting, and you've put a lot of time and effort into this, so thank you. But it's just good to see this actually coming to fruition a little bit. So very exciting.
It is very exciting, and I think for everyone to be able to see, although it's just a car body, to see that it's coming and it's actually happening, that's really exciting. Thank you.
Okay. I have one other question.
Go ahead.
The, excuse me, the first car starting in 2025, but what is the time frame for execution to be fully, for those cars to be fully in service?
Completely, it will be in 2029. We will be starting all of them in service. So we get about, starting with 2 next year, then we go to 6 the following year, 13 the next year, and so on until 2029. We get all 56 trains, 4-car train sets, and they will be in revenue service at that time. So you'll see as they get tested, they'll be placed in revenue service. Old trains get taken out, new trains come in. So you'll see a fair transition of new trains, old trains coming and going until the 2029 timeframe when everything is in full service.
Any other questions for Ms. Krisak? Hearing none, Connie, I will say that the question that I posed during the pre-brief was the weight of the train itself. Did we get any answers on that?
I'm sorry, the weight. Can you
Remember,
refresh?
we talked about the dimensions and everything,
Oh,
but we didn't know how much it weighed.
Yes, I did look at the weight, and now I forgot the number, but
That's okay.
I will give it to you. I truly apologize for that.
Just curious. Excellent presentation. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chrisette. At this time, we'll have a briefing of the 2022 MPD crime update with Chief Scott Cryer, Chief of Police and Emergency Management. Chief Cryer.
Good morning, Vice Chair Abdul Salam, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. Wright, board members. I'm your Chief, Scott Cryer, and I'm here to present some updates from the MPD department for the year. Our first slide is going to go into our UCR requirements of reporting Part 1 crimes. If you don't know, we report to the state. The state then reports to the FBI on what's called the Uniform Crime Report. And that report comes out annually. It just came out recently for last year. MPD does report like any other jurisdiction in the state of Georgia. And the good news is in the last 3 years, if you look at that report, we're continuing to see a huge decrease in violent crime. And I think we're going to continue to see that as we move forward this year and next year. This next slide is going to show you where we are year to date. This report comes out every morning. The EMT team and the C team gets this report every morning. And what we're showing on this report is the 7-day, the 28-day or the month, and then the year-to-date numbers for those 9 Part 1 crimes that we have to report to the UCR. And if you look at the far right side, year-to-date, we are 12% down in all our Part 1 crimes year-to-date for 2022, which is a very significant number. And I have to say, if it weren't for the hardworking women and men of the MPD, we would not be there. They do a tremendous job every day in keeping our riders safe, our employees safe, and it shows in some of these numbers, I think. Next slide, please. We also track our operator assaults. These assaults are defined by the Georgia Criminal Code, and we have about 6 different assaults that we track. And as you can see on the far right, we're significantly down this year in operator assaults, and I contributed that to a few things. Last year, we partnered with the supervision and the bus and rail departments to work on de-escalation training, making sure that our operators are witnesses and reporters and not enforcers. We continue to partner with them to make sure that we keep them as safe as possible and they understand what their roles are when it comes to behavior and crime on revenue. So this is a significant number here. I think we'll continue to see and work on this as we improve our de-escalation training over the next year or 2. Next slide. So our Ride with Respect Code of Conduct suspensions, 58% increase this year. That's a huge number, over 4,000 suspensions. That's 2,300 more than it was last year. A big part of that is we did a overtime detail in April, May, and June of this year to see how it affected the ridership experience. And with that 90-day detail, we saw a huge increase in our suspensions because of behavior. One of the things we noticed, Part 1 crimes, that's great. I like to see that number. That's important. But what's really important is the experience on the train as far as bad behavior. And this is what we use to try to address that. And we're going to continue to really work hard at this. You see, we've had 47 permanent bans year to date, 142 we call 365 or year suspensions, and repeat offenders. So the folks that are coming back after they're suspended, we've made 236 arrests for those repeat offenders that we see back on the system after being suspended. Mr. Greenwood and I have talked. We wanted to make sure that our employees are aware of what's going on out there with these suspensions. So we created this MARTA Intralink on the internet to where our employees can go and click on this link, and they can actually see the members of the community that have been permanently banned from the system with their picture and their name. So that way they can be reporters too. If they see these individuals on the system, they can call us and let us know, and we'll take action on that. The other thing Mr. Greenwood asked us to do is to complete a monthly report on all employee assaults. So what we're doing is we're coming up with a report once a month. We started last month, and it shows all our employees, what the case number is involved in the case, what the current court proceedings is, where we are in court, and that way we can track and see. This past month we had about 35 employee assaults. Of those, the majority of those are police officers just dealing with the public on a regular basis. Very few of them were the civilian employees. But we're going to continue to track this and report this out each month to make sure our employees know that we're tracking their cases. Next slide, please. This is just a reminder of what you passed in August. We're going to start seeing this come to fruition probably next month after, because they do have the ability to appeal their suspensions. But we're going to start using this permanent suspension for these repeat offenders. Next slide. Again, just a reminder, these are the additional ones that we included in the year suspension. And this is where we're starting to see an increase, especially with our operator assaults, fighting, damaging MARTA property. We're being able to see those one-year suspensions. Next slide. So I wanted to do a little bragging. This is our undercover team. This is a report that I gave the C team for their work in September. As you can see, they stay busy. 90 fare evasion citations, 119 suspensions, 5 people were wanted that they found. As you can see, the drugs and weapons that were recovered for the month. The good news is, too, is we work hand in hand with our Atlanta Police Department in our problem areas around the system. So 3 times during the month of September, they partnered with APD to do undercover details around the Greyhound bus station and our Garnett station down in that area to alleviate some of the stress in that area, which is significant drug trade down there. Next slide. Another great partnership is our partners with APD here at Lindbergh. They have a bicycle patrol that works out of the Buckhead precinct. And every day they're out there riding with MPD and APD just in this general area, Morosco Way, Lindbergh, to address crime and solicitation and issues that we face in this general area. And that's a fantastic joint detail that they do every week, every month. Next. Another good joint operation is with Georgia State University, APD, and MARTA. This 3-person team works out of the Central Precinct Station, and they work together every day to address crime in and around 5 Points, along with the Georgia State University area, and of course APD owns some of that property too. So this is a fantastic opportunity for us to work with our partners. Next slide. So some of the things we're looking at here, September, October. Thank you. Our CAD RMS contract was completed. The notice to proceed was issued, so we're looking forward to moving forward finally on getting that up to speed. Portable trailer cameras. We have 20 portable trailer cameras that are in the final stages in procurement. Talking to the one of the lowest bidders, if that person is selected, we're looking to see probably in the next 3 to 4 months we'll be able to deploy these mobile cameras throughout the system, whether it be in a surface lot or a problem garage, anywhere that we feel like we need eyes and ears, we can put up these portable trailer cameras. I'm looking forward to using those in fighting some of the crime. Our psychological testing service contract is due, so we're working on that. Recruitment efforts, huge for us right now. We're going to talk about numbers in a little bit, but we had staffing recruitment efforts in October, a couple of different locations. The annex one on the 15th was very successful. We got a lot of new applicants that are in the pipeline. Ms. Jacobs, over 35 years with our PCC, is retiring. Her last day is actually tomorrow. So we're looking for a new manager of our Police Communications Center just in time to bring in the new CAD and RMS system also. Also, Deputy Chief Burrows, for those of you who know him, he's decided to retire at the end of January. So I'm going to be looking to promote a new Deputy Chief here next month. My philosophy is the MARTA Police Department should never have to hire somebody from outside. I think it's important that we cultivate and grow our officers internally, and that's what we plan on doing. We're going to announce this job internally, and we're going to pick a great candidate to be the next deputy chief. So overnight, when all the majors, deputy chiefs, and the chief are fast asleep and watching late night TV, we have a person in charge of this department and this system. And Lieutenant Britt has been doing that job for a couple of years. I felt like it was important that we look at that as a command staff position, so I've asked to create that as a captain position, that they are in charge of the overnight operations. So we'll be making that a captain position and making that next month. Our internal tabletop will be at the World Congress Center November 17th. This is an opportunity for bus, rail, all the station operators, everybody to get together internally and work through problem situations such as fires, mitigation, things like that, that we don't necessarily need a lot of outside resources, but we feel like it's important for our employees internally to understand the process of what things and how things go. We did it last year. It was very successful, and we're looking forward to another one this November. And then finally, no more COVID, hopefully. We're going to have our annual awards banquet scheduled for May of 2023. We're looking at a location called Flourish on Maple Drive here in Buckhead, and we're working the final details out on that. Some of you should have gotten a whole date. If you're not, I'll make sure you get it. Next slide, please.
Hey, Scott?
Yes, sir.
While we're on that slide, I apologize if I've asked this question before and gotten an answer. I've forgotten. Are our cameras tied into Atlanta
Yes, sir.
PD?
They are.
Thank you.
Yes. We renewed that MOU last year.
Scott, I have one other question.
Yes, ma'am.
And I know you mention it from time to time, but take us through the CNSA app. If somebody sees something
Yes.
and they use the app, by the way, I got an update last night that it was being updated, so I know it. And I do use it, probably more than you want me to, but if I see anything, I put it on there. But where does that go and what's the process?
I'm glad you asked that because Colleen and I talked about this last week. I feel like the public still is kind of in the dark about this app. So we wanted to work on some plans, not only with the CNSA app, but some other crime-fighting initiatives we're gonna roll out here soon. But one of these is to really push the public message on the CNSA app. But in order to do that, you have to have somebody to respond. So my job as the police department is we have to make sure that, number one, when that CNSA app message hits the Police Communications Center, the call taker sees that and starts to ask questions, right? As you know, well, where are you? Because a lot of people just say, there's a fight on the train. Well, what car are you on? What line are you on? Where, you know, so there has to be a back and forth before she even dispatches it. So the call taker takes that information, gives it to the dispatcher then gives it to the police. My thought was, moving forward, we probably need to have constant direct communication with a group of individuals, sworn officers, that their only job is to respond to CNSA. And we're going to try this. We're going to try this model out a little bit to see how it works. It's labor intensive, but I feel like if people use the CNSA app and they don't feel like they get a response, then they're not going to use it anymore. So we need to be responsive when they do use it. We got a recent complaint from a gentleman, and I called and talked to him, and he had no idea what the CNSA app was. He was from out of the city. He was in Roswell. He came down for a game, and he had no clue about the CNSA app. So we got to do a better job of that, and then we have to be able to respond quickly to those complaints. So we're working on that. But that's where we are.
Scott, let me ask a follow-up question.
Yes,
I'm not sure how the public finds out about CNSA. So do you have posts on the trains, that kind of thing?
We'll have to do public announcements over the 1MCs. We'll do it on the buses. We can do commercials. We just did a recruitment ad on WSB 750. I don't know if any of you heard it, but it was very successful for our recruitment efforts. So I think there's some opportunities out there for us to get it to the public. And I think even our partners in the media, if we go to them and talk to them, I'm sure they'd be glad to do one-on-one interviews with us and get that message out.
Seems like to me your best way to get to people is the signage on the trains and buses,
Yes, sir.
if there's a place for them. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Surely that'd be part of the plan.
Okay,
Please.
my last question, I
Yes,
promise.
sure, no.
In years past, we used to get occasionally a thing that would show the top 10 or 12 systems in the country and kind of where we rated in overall safety. Yeah. Do we still get those reports? I know with COVID, a lot of things changed, but it used to show, the basic crimes like you've shown us on here and how they're rated. And then, because we were always near the top.
Yes. So when I got here a couple of years ago, I looked into that. There's the peer advisory group with APTA. And that report was generated by just sharing those numbers in the APTA group. APTA, as you know, that PAG group does not include all transit agencies, just the members of that group. When we started digging in it with Robert Goodwin and his team here at MARTA, IT Research Development, we found out that it's very difficult to compare MARTA to DART to any other jurisdictions because every state reports their crime differently. For instance, in New York, I don't have to report a theft in New York unless it's over $1,000 to the UCR. Whereas here, I have to report a theft of 1 cent. So it's so difficult to compare apples and apples and oranges. We kind of steered away from that until we could narrow it down to be more specific and be careful that we're actually comparing ourselves correctly. So we asked APTA to do this last year when we met in Orlando. And there is a committee going on right now. Our folks are helping with the template, but we're creating a template that all the jurisdictions will use the same template to be able to go back and do that again. You got it. These next couple of slides are what I was talking about, career development. Next slide, please. These 3 officers just completed a very difficult SWAT school. We call it SORT here at MARTA. Outstanding job. It was a very difficult course to get through. So I congratulate them on their achievement. Next slide. Same with this class. This is our defensive tactics school. This is a very difficult 2-week course where they teach post-certification on how officers handle defensive tactics. Sergeant Garman, Sergeant Hill, and Sergeant Darby in the blue circles, I hope you can see those, represented MPD well and did a fantastic job in the course. Next slide. Next slide. Major Davenport just completed the FBI National Academy. This is a huge, huge achievement. Less than 1% of all law enforcement officers in the country, including me, have not attended FBI National Academy. So I felt like this, along with what we call PERF, the Police Executive Research Forum, senior management class in Boston. I sent Chief McKenzie, Major Cloud last year. This year, Major Davenport went a year ago. Chief McKenzie went this year. Major Cloud went this year. I've got 2 scheduled for next year. This is part of the growing of the leadership in MARTA, so we don't have to go outside. and he completed that course and did a fantastic job. Next slide. And then Officer Wash, he does things nobody wants to do. He wants to be an EOD officer. He wants to do explosives. So this is one of his first classes that he attended and successfully completed his hazardous material technician class. Next slide. So here's our challenge, hiring. I went to IACP in Dallas last week. The number one topic everyone wanted to talk about was police recruiting and hiring. And what we found in the discussions was, and we wanted to bring this back to MARTA and HR, is the number one reason why departments were successful in hiring new police officers was what? Not pay, not equipment, the actual process of hiring. The kids I say kids, 21, 22-year-olds that want to be police officers, they don't want to wait 4 months, 5 months, 6 months to get a job offer. They want to apply and they want to get hired the next week. So this is what we're working on internally, is the process and how we hire and onboard people, because we're almost 60 officers short right now. And we've got to get that back up again. So our background recruitment folks are just busting their tails trying to hire people. We're still about 3 negative overall. We've had 37 separations. That includes retirements, quitting, separations, meaning I fired them. So we're not even broke, we haven't broke even yet, but we're headed in the right direction. We're doing much better. I feel confident in the next year we're going to continue to see that number shrink. But we also saw that problem in our dispatcher positions. So with the assistance of Mr. Greenwood and the C team, we were able to come up with some really positive incentives for retention. And we've been able to reduce those vacancies now. I think we're down to 3 this week with the new hires that we got coming in. So I feel confident that'll increase too. But with that, I'll open it up to any questions. That's the last slide.
Oh, Rita, this is Reggie. I've got my light on, so not Rita. I'm sorry, Roberta. Is she still on?
Thanks.
Okay, Chief, thank you for the presentation.
I'm here.
And first of all, I want to say thank you for your service, and thank you for the information. I've got a couple of things I wanted to add. One, I wanted to echo what Mr. Pond said about the CNSA app, which I think is very, very important. I think it's a really good resource for MARTA. But the only way to really get people to download it and use it is to put posters inside the trains. Whenever I've ridden the train, I can see posters of the different track or whatever information we're providing to the public. But it's imperative that we show them this app is available, this is how you get it, and please use it. So I think, one, we got to put that in front of everybody.
Right.
The second thing is I was curious to understand how the MARTA police operate within the train system. I just literally, I'm not really sure I know.
Okay.
So are officers on the trains riding along in every route? Are they walking through the trains as the trains move? I haven't seen them when I've ridden it. I just was curious.
Yeah.
I know we're short-staffed a bit, but I always think back to like air marshals, because when you fly, there's someone on that aircraft who has a gun and can arrest you if something happens, or at least you think there is. That was created, of course, after 9/11, but I'm wanting to give the public that sense that there's somebody who's going to be on this train, whether they're plain clothes or they're an officer you can visually see, because many times perception helps control violence or control crime. People think that they might get apprehended or in trouble. They won't even bother to try. So just give me a sense of that.
That's a great question. So let's 30-something stations, right? We've got, on average, during the daytime, or even in the evening shift, we've got about 30 to 35 officers available, right? So we really concentrate 2 things, the platform where a lot of the bad behavior starts, and then the stepping on and stepping off the train station. One of the great things about the new trains that are coming is the plank, so we can walk all the way down all 4 cars on a train without having to step off the train. One of the difficult things that we have now is they actually, for safety reasons, a lot of them don't like to go through the emergency doors between the 2 cars while it's running. So they'll step off a train at a station and step on a different car. So you might miss them if they're stepping, doing one after the other like that. One of the things we saw in the 90-day detail back in April, May, was the presence. So the crime itself didn't go down much in those 90 days, but what went way up were positive remarks by the public. Hey, we're seeing the police. They were on our train. They were on our station. So we're going to do this again beginning in November. We're going to run it for another 3 months. And I think it's important, like you said, for you to get on the system and be able to see a police officer. Now, there's officers out there. They're in the stations. We have surface lots we have to monitor for crime. We have the stations we have to monitor for crime. So they're not, we have buses, that they're stepping on, stepping off buses in the bus loops. So a lot of them are either in the bus loops or on the platforms. And then they're required, they have requirements that they step on and step off these trains also. Along with the sworn officers, we have our protective specialists. And one of the things that Mr. Greenwood and I are talking about moving forward is really having a new sense of eyes and ears out there that can let us know when there's bad behavior going on, so we can address it before it gets to that point. And we're going to come up with some special things for that too. But you also have some plainclothes undercover officers that you don't see that are also working the system. So that's kind of where we are.
Okay.
Yeah, Director Snyder, if I can just add to that, and Chief Creer is purposely, not divulging too much of the details in a public forum in terms of, the inner workings of, where he'll place staff and whatnot, but suffice to say, he's got a visible presence and an invisible presence as well, and your point's quite valid that it's the knowledge that someone who doesn't appear to be a police officer may well be that's going to help with public perception. And then in terms of the CNC app, Chief Creer is talking about enhancing the existing marketing of that program, but there are posters, signage on the trains, on the buses, on the platforms right now that talk about the CNC, but we recognize that after a while that becomes wallpaper, and we need to find a way to elevate that awareness so that those are the refresh incidents that we're working on.
Any other questions?
Roberta, this is Director Blakely.
Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. Great presentation, Chief Pryor. 2 quick questions. So going back to the bans and suspensions, I saw that you guys use Intralink to post the pictures and the names of the offenders. So are we exploring any other ways to do that? Because I'm sure, like, when you have the station agents who have all these other customer concerns to address, they won't, necessarily be able to say, oh, well, that's the guy that's,
right,
banned or suspended. So are we exploring any other?
It's difficult, unless we give them a tool to use, whether it be a cell phone or a device that they can instantly look at. We thought about doing, just a book that they can keep in their station, but that becomes wallpaper very quickly. It doesn't get updated like it should. They'll tear the papers, they'll tear the picture out and carry it with them. So it's difficult. The officers have it electronically on their phones, so we can explore that. My biggest concern is, and I told Collie this when we were talking about doing the link, is I have to stress to them to please just be witnesses. Please don't stop somebody and say you're not allowed in the system because you're permanently banned, because then you're going to start a fight. Right. So my fear is that they're going to turn into aggressive, police officers and try to stop people and interfere that way. So I don't know of another way we can do this other than maybe do some look at some technology that they can use to go back and look. But the station agents have the ability to use a MARTA computer before their shift, during their shift, after their shift, and click that link and kind of see who the latest ones are. We're going to update that annually. So like there's 47 pictures on there right now. I couldn't remember all 47 people that were banned. But they see them every day, and they know the problem children. And that's what we try to stress to them is when you see somebody that you know has been a problem in the past, just let us know, and we'll take a look and see if they need to be on the system.
Okay, gotcha. And then in regards to the collaborations that you do with other jurisdictions, so it seemed like they were kind of concentrated towards downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just a function of the crime stats, or how is that determined?
It's crime.
Okay.
Crime generates what we do. Data dictates where we are.
Okay.
Now, I will tell you, I'm working with East Point a little bit. They are extremely short-staffed, and I've talked to their chief, and we're trying to come up with some details that we can do at East Point. The Clayton County precinct handles South Clayton County. We get very little crime on the very south end.
Okay.
But those are the hot spots that we see the most issues with, especially violent crime. So that's why we concentrate on the Greyhound bus station area, downtown around 5 Points. Both of our homicides this year were at 5 Points. So we want to make sure that we have a good presence there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions for Chief Crayer?
I do have one last thing.
Go ahead, Mr. Palmer.
I was kind of surprised that the number of assaults to operators, staff, is anything you can do? Mostly you have compartments around them, that sort of thing, but I was just surprised. That's a real challenge for the operators.
We see a lot of bad behavior, especially on the bus routes. One of the things I did for this detail coming up is I asked to dig into the routes themselves. We picked the top 10 routes that have the most reported crime and the most incidents of bad behavior. And we've identified those 10 routes, and we're going to concentrate on those 10 routes during this detail. But again, it goes back to really pressing the issue with the operator that please, you're a good witness. If somebody wants to argue with you, don't argue with them. Don't announce, I'm going to call the police on you. Just pick up the phone and call us, and we'll come. Or the closest jurisdiction will be there quicker than sometimes we can be. But I want them to be reporters and witnesses and not. And that's where we see when they escalate to fights and escalate to an assault, it's usually because the operator continues to engage that person, and we want to deter them from doing that.
Chief, can you just elaborate a little bit? When I look at operator assaults as of October 23rd, I see 17 year-to-date in 2022 compared to 31 in 2021. Good decrease, 45%, but of those 17, are there levels of assault that you're aware of?
Absolutely.
Can you speak to that?
Sure. So as we talked about, there's different levels of assault and as far as the criminal code. So as you know, if some of you know, if you throw a bottle of liquid, say a soda, and it hits you on the arm, that's a simple assault under criminal code. So some of those are simple assaults. Some of those are actually fights where they actually get punched or kicked. Knock on wood, and we'll keep this going. We haven't had any, knives, guns, anything serious assault-wise to where it puts somebody in the hospital. Majority of those are simple assaults where they've thrown something at the operator, or they've punched the plexiglass shield and the shield flips back and hits the operator. But those are assaults, and those operators have to deal with that every day. So we want to try to alleviate that as much as we can. So fortunately, we haven't seen any serious assaults that would put one in the hospital. They're mostly just simple assaults.
Okay. Any other questions? Chief Craig, this was a very comprehensive report. Thank you for that.
Yes,
my
ma'am.
question to you would be in the area of human trafficking. You know, I worked on a regional human trafficking task force, and the transit services, particularly MARTA, has been very active and instrumental in making people aware of the human trafficking. And we've actually, a couple of years ago, we actually saved a young lady and that we tracked from down in South Carolina all the way up to the Art Center station, and she was rescued by the MARTA officer. So how are we doing with that? Are we still putting emphasis on the human trafficking?
Absolutely. Our criminal investigations unit has officers assigned specifically to deal with human trafficking, and they partner with the Atlanta Police Department and the federal government. The FBI has a national task force that members are assigned to, and we also rely on our JTTF partners to let us know when they have information that we can use to enforce any human trafficking on our system. So, yes, we do
Yes,
have
sir.
officers still doing that every day.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
If nothing further, we'll go ahead and move to our last item on the agenda, which is other matters. There's a report that you can visit at your leisure, and if nothing else, we'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you all.
All right, this is the Business Management Committee meeting for Thursday, October 27th, 2022. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes. Can I get a motion? It's been seconded. Okay. Call the question. All right. The meeting minutes have been approved. Thank you. Before we get into the agenda, I want to say publicly, congratulations to Kylie Greenwood for his permanent appointment to our general manager of this huge enterprise that we have. We are excited for you in this leadership role, and once again, we're grateful for your leadership, and we look forward to what we're going to do as a partner in making sure that this enterprise grows and we meet the needs of this very large metropolitan area.
Thank you, Director Farson.
Thank you. Okay. All right. The next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing a one-time cost of living adjustment for the retirees of the MARTA non-representative pension plan. LaShondra Dawkins, AGM Labor and Employee Relationship, you have the floor.
Good morning, Committee Chairman Frierson, Mr. Durrett, Business Management Committee members, Mr. Srinath, and General Manager Greenwood. I'm before you this morning in my capacity as the chair of the Management Pension Committee of the MARTA Non-Represented Pension Plan, seeking your approval and recommendation to the full Board of Directors to approve a resolution to authorize a one-time cost of living adjustment for the retirees and beneficiaries of the MARTA Non-Represented Pension Plan to be paid in January of 2023. To be eligible for the cost of living adjustment, the participant must have been in payment status as of January 1st, 2022. Next slide, please. The Management Pension Committee recommends that the retirees of the MARTA Non-Represented Pension Plan receive a one-time lump sum payment of $750. There are approximately 1,409 impacted individuals in the eligible retirees and beneficiaries group. Additionally, the $750 represents 3% of the average annual benefit for our retirees, which is at the $24,933,000 mark. Next slide, please. As you may know, MARTA maintains a defined benefit plan covering its non-represented employees, which was originally adopted January 1st, 1958. It is now a completely closed plan. It was closed to all newly hired non-represented employees in 2005, excluding police officers. As of January 1st, 2008, retirees, beneficiaries, and drop participants were entitled to receive an automatic 1% annual cost of living increase. Subsequent to this, the plan closed to our newly hired police effective January 1st, 2015. In an effort to reduce our unfunded liability of the plan, which produced cost savings to the authority, the MARTA Board of Directors passed a resolution upon recommendation of the Management Pension Committee authorizing the elimination of the 1% annual cost of living increase for the retirees, beneficiaries, and drop participants in February 2017. Next slide, please. In accordance with the foregoing action, the Management Pension Committee committed to annually review and consider the adequacy of the retirees' pension benefits under the plan with respect to a cost of living adjustment and MARTA's financial condition and ability to fund a cost of living adjustment. The terms of this commitment were memorialized in a cost of living adjustment policy, which was implemented October 12, 2017. Finally, as of January 1st, 2018, the plan is restated through plan amendments and has completely closed in that represented employees hired prior to 2005 transferring into a non-represented position do not have the option to participate in the defined benefit plan covering its non-represented employees. They now go to the defined contribution plan. Since the elimination of the automatic 1% COLA that they used to receive, The retirees received a cost of living adjustment in January 2019 for the plan's performance ended December 31st, 2017, and again January 2022 for the plan's performance ended December 31st, 2020. And I share that because since this is a lagging action, sometimes it's hard to keep track of where we are. So those are the historical COLAs that they've received since we eliminated the automatic COLA. Next slide, please. In accordance with our COLA policy, the Management Pension Committee, with the guidance of our plan actuaries, reviewed the rate of return for the plan year ended December 31st, 2021, the funding position of the plan, and the consumer price index data for the most recent preceding 12-month period. The respective rate of return was 12.45 as compared to our actuarial assumption of 5.5%. The funded position of the plan as of December 31st, 2021 was 92.82%, which was a tremendous funding position, and we're really in great position at that time as compared to our regional peers. The CPI data review was averaging around 9.43%, and as we know, inflation has been climbing. After careful consideration of that respective information, the Management Pension Committee determined that we still did enjoy a favorable year in 2021, which may justify approving a cost of living adjustment for the eligible retirees and beneficiaries. During the committee's deliberations, the committee was motivated to ensure that those retirees receiving the lowest monthly benefit receive an appropriate consideration in our COLA recommendation. And to that end, we opined that the equitable lump sum approach would accomplish the intended result. Next slide. Therefore, the Management Pension Committee recommends that the retirees and beneficiaries of this plan receive a one-time lump sum of $750 to be paid in January 2023. The plan's actuary has determined that this action will have an approximate one-time cost of $1,056,750 to the pension plan. The Management Pension Committee is authorized to recommend cost of living adjustment increases for retirees to the MARTA Board of Directors for consideration. The board, in its sole discretion, will determine whether pension benefits will be increased for a cost of living adjustment. And so I conclude by respectfully requesting that this committee recommend to the full board approval of this resolution to authorize a one-time lump sum payment of $750. Thank you.
And thank you. I can I get a motion?
Move.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Abdul. Second? Okay. Okay. All right. So it has been moved in second online. All right. Any discussion by the board members? Ms. Abdul? No.
Yes, sir.
Any questions you may have?
No, I don't have any questions. I just would say to my fellow board members that the pension committee, we deliberated this issue long and seriously, and I think this is a good move, and it's going to be a benefit for the morale of our retirees and for our future retirees to see that we do try to take care of them in this way.
Okay. Thank you. Here, seeing no other questions from the board members, I'll call the question for a vote. The resolution has passed. Thank you.
Thank you
Ms.
for your
Dawkins.
consideration.
Appreciate it very much. The next item on the agenda is a briefing, FY 2023 first quarter financial highlights and financial performance indicators as of September the 30th, 2022. Greg Patterson, Senior Director of Budget and Grants. You have the floor. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Chair Frierson, Vice Chair Durrett, GM Greenwood, and Mr. Srinath, members of the Business Management Committee. It's my pleasure to present to you the first quarter financial results and some of the highlights. Next slide, please. At a summary level, the authority is operating at an actual surplus of about $29 million relative to budget for the quarter. This is due to favorable revenues of about $11 million and favorable expenses of about $18 million, which I'll go a little bit more into in the next slide. So on the revenue side, some of the noteworthy highlights, if you were to combine both sales tax and ad valorem revenues, they're both favorable to budget by about $3.7 million combined. That's the result of a continued strong local economy and a little bit of the impact of inflation that you see there. Another great piece of news is passenger revenues were above budget by about $3.7 million. We're seeing a pretty steady ridership growth, particularly in the rail category. Bus ridership still remains slightly below forecast. I'll cover that a little bit more in the KPIs, but that's a positive trend. And then our other revenues area was above budget by about $3 million, primarily due to a alternative fuel rebate revenue that we recognized. We did not originally budget for that because, to be on the conservative side, we weren't sure if that program was going to be renewed. But it was, so that's a favorable recognition on the revenue side. On the expenses side, the ongoing vacancy rate really drives a lot of the positivity here. You still see salaries and wages were below budget on expenses by about $12.5 million. Same with total benefits. It's driven by the same impact, the vacancy rate. Now, the good news there is that we've managed to reduce the vacancy rate, start filling some of those vacancies, so it's gone from a vacancy rate of about 16% down to 13%, and a lot of those filled positions are bus operators, so that's very good news there. Overtime is slightly higher than the budget, again, really driven by that vacancy rate currently. Contractual services is favorable for the quarter by about $8.3 million. This is largely due to just a reduction in ridership demand for the contracted paratransit services. And then I'll just make one more note that on the material side, we were favorable due to our forecast of higher prices for compressed natural gas fuel costs, but the results came in a little lower than that, which is good. So next slide, please. Now, this is going directly into the September performance. If you see there, the overall here is that we're still operating at a net surplus of $12.7 million. You will notice that there is the deficit in the budget there. That is largely driven because when we do the forecast of revenues, it's an annual forecast that's then divided by 12 and kind of straight lined across the year. Whereas specifically, the expenses, the month of September specifically, we had 3 pay periods anticipated, so that 3 pay period has an increase in the expenses there. And we also had some forecasted increases that were built into the budget. So for this month alone, you'll see a budgeted deficit. Across the quarter, it smooths out. You'll actually see that trend again, I believe, in March, because it has a similar impact then. Next slide, please. Some highlights for September. Sales tax performance came very close to what the forecast was, slightly below, but it's pretty much on point with what our original forecast was. Passenger revenues continue to drive above budget, $1.5 million. Again, you'll see in the KPIs it's that same upward trend of the rail ridership growth. On the expenses side, it's a similar story as the quarterly review because salaries and wages are low and benefits are low relative to the budget, largely due to the vacancy rate. And contracted services was $3.3 million below, again, due to the demand for paratransit services. One other note here is on the non-labor expenses, we're $3.5 million above budget as a result of the increase we had for casualty and liability reserves. Next slide, please. Moving on to key performance indicators. Next slide. You can see here this is the very positive trend on the passenger revenues. Passenger revenues, much like the others, is sort of a straight line revenue forecast. Just we have no meaningful data to make it a little more specific month over month. But great news is that we should continue to show a positive revenue here. September passenger revenues exceeded budget by $1.5 million. And then next slide, you can kind of see the breakdown on the riderships, the trips themselves. You can see here on the bus ridership, we continue to fall just slightly below our forecasted levels by about 100,000 trips, and we've exceeded the prior September, though, by about 300,000. So better than last year, not quite where we were looking for the growth. However, on the next slide, you'll see this is where the ridership growth really seems to spike up, where this is the rail increases. And we have been able to see that the rail increases are attributed to some additional events traffic, additional airport traffic, and a few of the midtown and downtown stops having some additional commuter traffic as well. Okay, next slide, please. I'd like to invite Carrie Roca up to give an update on the capital highlights.
Good morning. Next slide, please. So this is our first report for fiscal year 23, capturing the spend for July, August, and September. In terms of the sources of funds, we had budgeted for this point in the year to be at 227.5, and our actual is 228.9. On the uses side, we had a budget. Thank you. On the uses side, budgeted value of 128 million, and we had a spend of 29 million. You will see in facilities and stations there is a negative number in the actual. That was a correction that we had made for Clayton County real estate that had been charged fully against state of good repair, and there is a split there between Clayton and the state of good repair. So just the fact that this went across 2 fiscal years, you'll see the adjustment here. Typically you would see that just in whole, but that's why there was a negative there, because that adjustment was made. $73.3 million in debt service paid versus a budget of 72.5, leaves us for an overall $102.3 million spend on the capital side against a $200.5 million budget. Next slide, please. And these are the top spends for the top projects, top expenditures for the top 10 projects for this point in the quarter. Our top spend right now is mostly on vehicles overall, so on rail car replacements and life extensions. TCSU right now is a project that's wrapping up, so you see that quick spend of their budget overall. And things that are moving along well, the TR4 project, as well as there's a new project on here, which is GASB. That's new accounting principles that were required to capture in the capital budget, and mostly for software. So you'll see that very consistent through the year. And then as we've noted, some of the top spends on escalators have reached this top 10 for this quarter. And that's my report.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much. This is just a briefing for financial information purposes. Does anybody have any questions from the board members? Any questions?
No, but it was nice. It's a very nice report, and it's nice to hear it quarterly or however we need to do it, but thank you.
Okay, great. I just look forward to seeing more capital projects for expansion on this list. Quite a bit of this is for repair and some other issues, but once again, as we begin to expand these projects, we'll see more of these on this capital list. So thank you. Appreciate it very much. Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Jim.
Before you walk away, the 310 and 311 rail car replacement program, way below budget. Is this the purchase of the 400 cars?
No, actually, so this is just the actual spend. This is the top 10 based on spend to date. So for the first 3 months, there's another list which is the top 10, top 10 projects overall for our budget, and I believe the CQ 400s are the second, number 2 in terms of our budgeted spend. So 6 of our 10 top projects have not reached this list, and so those are really where we're focused in terms of trying to make sure things are operating well and moving well on those projects.
I guess maybe my question should have been, what is the difference between replacement and life extension? Because I can't imagine that we're replacing any of the 300 cars.
Right. I can see George making his way up. Come on up, George, and maybe just speak to. So there are still some components that have to be replaced outside of the major overhaul program. So there's a fleet life extension program that specifies particular things, but then, of course, on a fix and find or find and fix basis, they still have to keep the fleet running. So maybe George can get into the details.
You can repeat what he said, but you don't have to.
Mr. Pine, you have a question?
Yes, and going back to Kali and Raj, I think spending a little time on these numbers every quarter is very important, and I would suggest we do the same thing on the prior committee meeting, looking at the operational metrics once a quarter would be great.
We'll do that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from the board members? Seeing none, thank you very much. So I see no other questions or comments, then this meeting is adjourned. All right, thank you.